topic. Love it. All right. Well, good afternoon. Happy Tuesday, everybody. You've joined Links to Learning. We have 2 more sessions before the end of the year. So we're honored that you have joined us. We're honored you've come on this journey for us in 2022. You know, these webinars are all about listening to story, listening to the knowledge, being inspired, building our capacity. So it's really great that we can gather as, you know, a virtual community, virtual family. So we're honored that you have joined us today. My name is Michelle. I'm joining from Miskowski, Edmonton, Treaty 6 territory. And it is a cold one today. Winter is here. I'm working on my relationship with winter. I heard that a couple of years from my elder, and I've taken that every cold day. I'm saying I'm working on this relationship. You know, we're right around the corner to a full moon. That grandmother moon is going to join us. So there's some, you know, energy that's happening in our lives right now. And if that's going on for you, just know that's kind of the process. That's kind of the journey when it comes to that full moon. So an opportunity also just to remind us to let go of those things that don't serve us anymore. So let's just take a moment, press pause. It's midday. And just take a breath, maybe have a drink of water, maybe take a big stretch. Just taking a moment to honor the gift of this day. You know, when that sun rises in the east, Creator meeting us for another day, Creator saying, walk your path, honor, you know, community, honor your spirit, honor that land, honor the story. So we give thanks to Creator for the gift of this day, that we are surrounded by goodness wherever we walk. And we never walk alone. I was reminded not too long ago that, you know, the matriarchs, the grandmothers, the grandfathers, our ancestors, they walk with us. So we're never alone. So thank you, Creator, for the gifts that have been given to us. All right, so let's get on with this webinar, shall we? We're really delighted. We have 2 guest speakers with us this afternoon. So welcome. So we have Shawna-Kay Thomas, who's the Director of Corporate Communications and Culture. And we have Matthew Ward. So we're delighted. They're both joining us from this organization called pipikwan. And so we actually, if you're very interested in this organization, this company, we did have them on, they're colleagues. We had them here last Wednesday, and it was a really great webinar, really great session. So we do record these webinars, so it's a good resource. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to tell your colleagues to check them out. So if you just go to Can Do website, you should be able to find, you know, the copies of these webinars. And the one that their colleagues was from last Wednesday, and it was really great. So we're honored to have you join us. I have great expectations for the both of you. So today's conversation is around the digital workplace. So, you know, before COVID, you know, the statistic here is about 4% of employees worked from home, and then that switched big time, you know, when the pandemic happened. People were now starting to work remotely, starting to work from home. And even now there's people who still are going to work from home. So that number has from 4% now has increased to 30%. So with more employees and new hires demanding a remote or hybrid option as part of their contract, we're just looking at, you know, ways to a new way of working, this digital workspace. And what are some ideas? What are some thoughts around that? So we're looking forward to the webinar. So a little bit about our guest speakers. So Shawna is a strategic and creative communications professional with over 12 years of experience in journalism and communications. That's amazing. And then we got Matthew he's a member of the Driftpal Cree Nation and Treaty 8 territory. So he has completed his undergraduate degree in critical Indigenous studies and political science in Vancouver at the University of British Columbia, and has supported planning and engagement efforts in Edmonton's housing and homelessness sector for 7 years, volunteers in several organizations. So they're just bringing some really good knowledge to today's conversation. Again, I can't say it enough how honored we are to have you join us and to share your knowledge, and just, perhaps start a conversation. So there will be opportunity for questions at the end, but like I said earlier, use that chat box. Also, I really like those, reaction buttons. So if you like what you're hearing, feel free to use those reactions, and feel free to use that chat box. It's there for you. You're here not to listen to but you're here to listen to our amazing guest speakers. So we're honored you're here. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm just going to pass this virtual mic over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Michelle. It's a pleasure for us to be here. We're grateful for the invitation and the opportunity to share. We're all on a learning journey together. So if you have insights as well when it comes to questions and answers, feel free to drop your suggestions, what you've been doing that's working, what you've seen work elsewhere. We're also open to learning. Matt and I are going to be sharing based on our experience in our current roles, but also past experiences. We're not digital experts, but we do work in an environment where we're fully remote. And so we're hoping that whatever we share today will be of value and benefit to you and your team. I'm just gonna get started and share my screen here. I'm sure you hear that sentence at the start of every presentation. Let me just share my screen. Yeah, so today, we'll be talking about the digital workplace, and I'll just give a quick intro, myself and Matt, before we go into the meat of the matter. So I am from Jamaica. I came to Canada in 2016, so maybe I'm still a newbie here. And outside, being white is not the norm unless you're at the beach on white sand. So I'm still adjusting to the weather here, but I'm grateful to be on this land and to live with people here, to use my talents and gifts and also learn from experiences here. I have one daughter and I live in Airdrie with her and my husband. And I started working with pipikwan in 2021. So kind of in the midst of the pandemic, you'd say. Before then, I worked with a nonprofit. And then back home, I work with government, nonprofit, and media. So that's a little bit about my experience. And I'm hoping that today I can add value to your life and to your work, as I also learn from you in our discussions. So I'll turn it over to Matt.
Great. Thanks, Shawna-Kay. And thank you for the wonderful intro, Michelle. Yes, my name is Matt Ward. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm the engagement manager at pipikwan. I am a member of Driftpal Cree Nation, as is mentioned. So Treaty 8 territory is home for me in Northern Alberta, but I currently live in Mississauga in Treaty 6 territory. I call downtown Edmonton home. I've lived here for a long time and I love it very much. Even on days like today when it's -40 and I don't feel like venturing out. As mentioned, I worked most of my career in nonprofit spaces. And I think part of the context that I bring to this conversation is how these tools have supported me in my engagement work, working in communities all over the country, and also working in the context of COVID and having to have previously transitioned a team of over 100 staff into a completely virtual environment during COVID. So I'm sure that's not a unique experience now for lots of folks who were a part of those transitions too. So I'm really excited to see where organizations are at, where you folks are working and what that's like for you. Yeah, I think maybe I'll hand it back to Shawna-Kay to start us off.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So for today, we'll run through a little agenda we've got here. just about 5 segments, I would say. First, we want to share our story as a company, how we started, how we work together, and that kind of thing. We're going to be looking at defining the digital workplace, what that is, how we define that now, as well as how the digital workplace has evolved over time. Some of the infrastructural things to consider in the digital workspace in starting that up, or if you've already started, maybe some additional things that you could consider. And then the areas to consider, yeah. So if you also have ideas on any of these while we're talking, feel free to use that chat, as Michelle said, and drop your suggestion there so we can learn together. The pipikwan, as I mentioned, is a remote company. We are an Indigenous owned, led, and majority staffed PR and Indigenous engagement company. Started about 6 years ago by Gwin, a Métis woman out of Edmonton. And she started the company because in working with the government, she saw this need to provide support to communities for public relations, communications, media relations. In her words, she'd usually say she was working for the colonizers and getting their work done. And so community was always asking her to do this work for community, to help them to elevate their voices, not to speak for them, but to help them to get into those spaces where their voices are needed and to share their experiences, to share the truth of their experiences, how they want it shared. And so she was nudged by Chief Tony of Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation to go into this work. And she ventured off on her own and started supporting communities. And it has been about 6 years since, and it's grown from just her to now we have about 25 people on staff. And all that, most of that growth took place in the last 2 years. So I think we've had, quite a run with onboarding people remotely and working on processes remotely and developing how we work together remotely, all the things you can think of that comes with remote work. We've been working through that and learning through that. So in our remote environment, we all work from home. And a part of Shawnee's vision was to make sure that Indigenous people who living in their community can remain in their community. And so any economic benefit of being employed can go back to community and go back to their families. They wouldn't have to feel pressured to leave those spaces to come into urban areas or areas outside of their community to get work. So that was very important in making that decision to make the company fully remote. And at the time when Shawnee started the company, she also was had a young child. So I suspect that, having a young child, that's the ideal. I want to work from home. And so anybody who I bring on board, I'd love for them to have that opportunity as well. The focus was on people and making sure that, while you're building capacity for people, Indigenous people being the priority, and people of color and Black people as well, you're able to build capacity and to allow those people to transfer those skills within their community. So that was also a focus for starting the company, and realizing that the impact of being remote on people like that, you can hardly measure that. You'll hear stories of people speaking of, the flexibility it offers, how it benefits their mental health and wellness. There's improved quality of life. It boosts their creativity. Just knowing that they have control over where they work and they are not being dragged by the arm to go into a building. And if you have to go into a building, that's totally okay too. You can make the digital environment one where people feel like they have flexibility and control over how they work. So it's not to say that only remote work is, where people can feel like they belong. You can create an environment using digital tools where people also feel like they belong. But for us, remote work is what has been working. There are some challenges that we've encountered along the way. As you can imagine, everybody's working all over the place. Some are in the East, some are in the West. Some people even go on vacation and decide to work. They take a break and go to other countries, but they can still work. It's making sure that you have the facilities, the tools and resources where people can still connect, people can find what they need in a timely manner, and they can rely on the systems that are in place to get their work done. So we've faced challenges. It hasn't been smooth. And those challenges we've met, as a team working collaboratively to discuss where are the bumps and the hiccups and the potholes and what, processes and systems are not working too well for us. Some of our processes, refining those and making sure those are documented, because, in a regular office, you could probably just skip across to somebody else's cubicle and say, hey, how do you do this again? But sometimes you're alone, there's nobody on the G chat to message, or people are doing their own work. And so you have to have that space where people can go look at a document and see what they need to do, what steps they take if this is happening versus steps they take if another situation is happening. So documenting those processes has been something we've been working through, making sure that we connect is another area that I'd say has challenges, but we've been working through that, I think, pretty well. Just making sure that people can collaborate. Again, in the physical office, you meet at the coffee machine, or when you take a break for lunch in the cafeteria, or just walking in the hallway, going to the printer. Well, at home, you have a printer, you have a coffee machine, but you're the only one there. So we have to create those spaces where people can gather and so forth. That's very important. And much of how we work is based on Indigenous teachings, Indigenous methodologies, Indigenous ways of being and doing. So most of the things, all of the things that we do are always informed by those practices. So gathering, collaborating, working together are foremost in our mind. And I know in Shawnee's mind as well, and her vision for the company. And so as we are growing and working through, those are just some of the things that we've had to work through in this digital world, and creating a digital workplace where we can be happy and where we can be proud and safe, and we want to welcome others in as well. So in defining the digital workplace, many definitions and descriptions float around. One of the simpler ones would probably be, it's a virtual form of a traditional workplace. So a traditional workplace would have, your physical things in place physically, desk and cupboards and cabinets and documents and so on. This workplace is virtual. Everything is online, digitized, and should be easily accessible. There are many elements for collaboration and productivity, and these are performed largely through digital applications and technologies. So it's bringing systems together, people together, content together in a virtual space, not eye to eye, not face to face, all virtually. It's focused on equipping our employees with the tools that they need to collaborate and communicate effectively in a single digital space. Now, in the workplace, even pre-pandemic, communication has always been one of the things that organizations, you want to strengthen and make sure that you are maximizing that, because if communication is lacking, that's one of the sure ways for employees to lose morale, become demotivated, they don't feel connected. So communication is important. So it's bringing together all the systems, all the people, content in the organization, and equipping people with resources where they can collaborate and they can communicate. We're all in different spaces in this digital workplace. So some may be in Nova Scotia, as we have some people, some may have to fly out to Ottawa for projects that we've had, some in Edmonton, some in Airdrie, some maybe on the beach somewhere taking a vacation, but decide to check in on something they want to finalize for work. So people are everywhere, and we want them to have access to the same things that they would have access to if they had a physical office. And it doesn't matter what size the organization is. I think digital workplace can work for any size organization. We've seen since COVID, a number of larger organizations are kind of doing a hybrid situation, some playing around with being fully remote and testing that, piloting that to see how it's working. Smaller companies probably are doing that a lot more, but I think it can work across the board for any size organization. There are benefits of and opportunities that come with a digital workplace. And so for us, one of the benefits is that we can get talent from basically anywhere in Canada. So it doesn't matter where you are, we can recruit and you can work for the company. And that's great for employers. You know, you're not confined to people who are only in Edmonton or only in Airdrie, only in Calgary, because they have to come to a physical office. And in that way, you're getting a broader reach on talent as well. Oftentimes, you know, there's so much, you see a job in Toronto and you're like, that's a perfect fit for me, but guess what? It says I have to come into an office. Oh, too bad, they just lost a great candidate because I have to go into an office for that. And the digital workplace breaks down barriers of a traditional workplace. There are quite a few barriers with traditional workplaces. You have to show up at 9 and you have to, well, you don't have to leave at 5 typically. If you work longer, hey, but we wanted to show up at 9. Well, and that can be a barrier for some people who may have kids to drop off and they may be delayed some mornings and they may have to reach in at 9:30 or 10. For traditional workplaces, pre-COVID, I think most workplaces now are kind of loosening up a little bit or lightening up a little bit on those things, just realizing that, oh, these people are actually humans. They are not just robots working for us. They have a life, they have kids, they have families, they have health appointments, they have other things they need to attend to. And so the digital workplace breaks down those barriers and allow people to come as they are, how they are, and be able to basically show up as their full selves at work. Knowing that there are good days, bad days, days where I'm gonna be late, I'm gonna be delayed, days where I need to take 2 hours break in the middle of the day, but I will get back to doing my work later on in the evening. Those kinds of barriers that we would have had if you go into a physical office, you can't just hop out. Or pre-COVID, most offices, you can't just run out and say, hey, gonna get my kid, be back in 3 hours or 2 hours, like what? That wouldn't be taken so kindly, especially if you're doing it every week. But a digital workspace creates that opportunity for flexibility. And it has been evolving and is changing how we work. It's not new, I would say, because pre-COVID, and COVID I think is the marker for much of this, because it was that time when we saw like employers going wild with, do you mean all my employees have to work from home? Like, how is this gonna happen? I remember in my previous job, we used to cater to small businesses. And so we had to run webinars. Okay, how do you set up work from home for your employees? How do you deal with crisis communications? Like, it was just a flood of webinars. And that's when webinars became so popular too. Like everybody was doing webinars on something. And one of the big things was just how to operate in a virtual space, because we weren't used to it. But before that, we had aspects of digital workplace. So you would have had some companies that had intranet, some people were using like different softwares to chat, people were having spaces where they would store their data, and that's all a part of digital workplace. But now we've gone to that other side of the world where you're now, oh, you mean I can work from home? I don't have to drive to work? You mean I don't have to clock in and clock out? You mean I can go and take my lunch at 11? You know, everything has changed, and some people, you know, were tearing their hair out because they couldn't imagine it happening. But that's where we are now. And the internet has been propelling much of our digital workplace culture and life for the past few years. You know, internet has allowed us to do a lot of things. We can share documents. Can you imagine I can share a document with you and you can actually edit that document while I am also editing the document? Like, that's wild. For some people or ancestors maybe who have gone before us, trying to explain that to them would drive them crazy. Like, how is that even possible? But that's what we're doing, and it's because of the internet. We're updating people on projects we're working on by just using a software. We're getting instant messages through GChat. We're finding documents we need, and templates have been created just to copy paste stuff. So lots of things have changed, and the internet has been a driver for that. And then COVID-19 further expanded that for us. New realities of working. Some people have gone fully remote and some people remain hybrid. And there's still some companies that are the brick and mortar. You have to go to a physical office. Now, when we're in a digital workplace, people want it to be seamless and painless, which is where processes come in, making sure you're clear on what to do when and how to do it. You're onboarding somebody new, for example, you want to be as clear as possible on how you work, where people can find things, who they can contact if they need help. And it doesn't feel like such a pain sitting, because now you're by yourself at a desk at home and you don't know where to find anything and you don't know what systems the company is using. So, you know, that experience is not one that people want. At this time, you know, before when most people were in an office and you were onboarded, you could probably ask your supervisor quickly next to you, or you could run to a cabinet that they showed you that some things were stored and you could grab it. But now you don't have that being by yourself at home. So the digital experience is important, that it's seamless and painless in making those things that would be so readily available in a physical office still be available in this virtual space. And the internet can allow us to do much of that. People want personalized experience in a digital workplace and authentic experiences at work. They want to know that you are thinking about what their needs are and how they are working. And also, you know, catering to the uniqueness of each person while still having some kind of standard across the board, but making sure you're hearing from everybody. And internet and technology can play a significant role in that. So we've looked at how we are describing the digital workplace now and how it has changed over time. And Matt is going to help us to look at some of the infrastructure that we need to consider when we're setting up this digital workplace. So it can be seamless and painless, engaging, and where people can feel safe, happy, and feel like they still belong.
Awesome. Thanks, Shawna-Kay. Yeah, as I talk through some of the infrastructure pieces, if there's any specific questions that folks have, please feel free to use the chat if you're looking for specific examples. Would you mind going to the next slide? Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so there's some really just like tangible things that are required in order to make sure that you have a functional digital workplace. And one of those for sure is that shared space where people are co-working. And I would argue that this is also an important tool to be considering if you're working in an organization that does not currently have cloud-based document storage, and not just making sure that materials remain accessible to your teams and your staff, but it's also a really important risk mitigation tool in terms of document storage, privacy. I'm thinking also about risks like fires or floods and how that can, if all of your documentation is only stored on site in your communities or in your organization, that you may be at significant risk if you don't have digital tools in place to help make sure that your team not only has access to them, but that you have ongoing access to them. These might look like cloud-based tools like OneDrive, like Google Drive. I know our team uses Google Drive heavily to do this. And when setting these spaces up, you'll also want to be thinking about collaboration spaces. So you may have a board and maybe they have a specific space where they store documents and have access to that other folks don't. Leadership teams, you may have department spaces. Those, I think sometimes when you say them out loud sound really obvious, but I've found when you go into some organizations and how they're working, especially in digital spaces, if you don't have that intention, folks tend to have blinders up and really focus on their own workflows. And so then you find that they have their own way of doing things, which can be great in your own personal spaces. But when you're working as a collaborative team, it's really important to make sure that you have alignment around those shared workspaces. You'll need virtual meeting tools, not unlike Zoom. So I'm really excited to see that folks seem to be familiar with that tool today, using it. Maybe a little too familiar with it over the last few years. I'm not sure, but making sure that you have these tools and that they also can accommodate you in not just virtual environments, but hybrid ones are super important, and that they're meeting your needs. So if you're requiring tools that can accommodate just team discussions, and that's one thing, but also exploring the features of those tools to explore things like collaboration. There's lots of really interesting tools out there that I've had some exposure to, but like Google Meets and voting, or the opportunity to draw together on a board and brainstorm. Those are all really important ways to create engagement through these tools as well. Often when you're thinking about digital workplaces, I think there's groups of people who think, oh, it's going to be too much effort, it's going to be too expensive. So that shift will be really challenging. Or you have folks who think, oh, if I just give everybody a laptop, that will cut a lot of costs and be really efficient. And I would say it's actually somewhere in the middle. It's really important that you are investing in those tools for folks to have, but also really understanding the types of software that your teams need in order to do your jobs and do them well. And so making sure, you may be saving costs and investments in spaces by having a digital workplace, but you should be redirecting some of those savings into investments into the tools that you're using in those environments. The last thing that I'll talk about really quickly is just hubs for information access. It can be really easy to just have a folder and tell people that they need to just go to that folder if they have questions, that you have 100 documents in there that tell them how to do everything. But making sure that you have an interactive way of exploring what those processes are is super important. Shawna-Kay is really great at this in our organization, which I'm grateful for, which is creating opportunities for information sharing, whether that's email marketing campaigns internally, features of specific policies or roles or functions of our company. And we are working on getting to a space of having our own intranet, but that's another great tool if you haven't explored that yourself, of building capacity in your teams in order to create that collaborative shared digital workplace, and some of those more organic collision points between staff too that may not always happen in a digital environment. Next slide. So talking about people, I know that for our organization, working with youth, really building the capacity of young people, especially Indigenous youth, is one of our core functions as a company. It's a really integral part of the way that we work. And so making sure that our organization is working in a way that works with young people is super important for us. And with the younger workforce, we're seeing a shift in expectations of what work looks like. What work-life balance looks like. And I think that's something that we can all likely agree with, is this shift to a digital space. Part of the benefits are being able to weigh different parts of your life differently throughout the day, which is much more difficult to do when you're on site in location in an office that you don't always have control over. For us, it's really important, and it's created opportunities for me to get to work with people in an environment that maybe I wouldn't have had the opportunity to if I was in an office, like people with young children, like students. These types of opportunities really also extend skill sets and experience to groups who have been marginalized by typical workplace environments and which aren't accessible. That flexibility has lots of benefits for people. I think when I'm thinking of as an Indigenous majority staffed organization, access to culture and to ceremony and to our communities is really important part of who we are and what we do. And in a typical 9 to 5 environment that I may have been in before, getting to slip out for a couple hours in the morning to attend a pipe ceremony, or needing to go up north to my community because of a passing of an elder, that those aren't barriers to me being a part of a team, and that I can still be the teammate that I need to be here and the community member that I need to be when I'm called to do those duties too. For me, that has really created a space where not only do we get to know each other more in those spaces because we get to experience them more together as a team, it really helps build connection too and understanding and support. If someone steps out for the morning because they're going out to ceremony, someone's really excited to step in and help support their work while they're gone. And that's something that I don't know I would have seen in the same way in a traditional workplace environment. Next slide. So I think for me, I would describe myself as a little bit of a nerd when it comes to what are the new applications that people are using to support their workflow. What tools are people really leaning into? And I totally get that not everybody is on that same page as me when it comes to those types of conversations. And admittedly, it can be really overwhelming. There's new tools coming out every day. There's huge swings and shifts in expectations of the types of work that you may need to do or tools you may need to interact with, not even with expectations from your own organization, but others who've adopted tools and are asking you to use them too. And I don't know if I have a simple answer to say, these are the ones that you really should know or not. I think for me, what it really requires is both a need to be flexible when it comes to accommodating tools that are influencing your work from external pressures. But when it comes from internally, it's really important that you have rigor and process around what tools are being adopted and what purpose they serve. Ways to be revisiting those things, whether it be, quarterly, annually, every 2 years, around, is this tool still accomplishing the thing that we need it to do? Are there new tools who are doing multiple things that could replace tools that we're spending too much money on? Are these processes even relevant anymore? Or why are we capturing this information? These are really, really important questions. And again, really simple questions, but are often forgotten about, especially once workflow's been established and people are used to working a certain way for a long time. Simple questions like, so what is that happens with that information when you're done? Or when was the last time you opened that application, are things that could really help you save money and also help tighten budgets. I think for me, being open to innovation is an important part of that as well. Finding tools that automate processes that don't need to require human attention all the time, but also to make sure that when you're using these tools, that they remain accessible to the teams that you're working with as well. The learning curves can be really challenging. Introduction of too many tools can be really overwhelming. But if you have a really solid base to work from, then exploring and experimenting with things a little bit over time becomes really accessible and actually really exciting for people who just want to find new solutions and better support their work processes. Yeah, I don't know. I think another thing is just like, communication tools have been like really important, but also can be really overwhelming too. So making sure that you really formalize what your communication channels are and what they're used for is another really important tool. So, using Google Chats or text messages as like an informal way to touch base with folks. Email for specific project updates and external communications. Like just trying to make sure that you have a clear understanding so those expectations are set across the board, and then things don't get missed. If you don't answer a text message right away, that doesn't mean that a project deadline gets missed when you should have been monitoring your email, or vice versa. Yeah, I think that's all I have to share around the technology piece. I'm going to hand it over to Shawna-Kay again, just to talk a little bit more about onboarding.
Thanks, Matt. And Matt mentioned not missing a work deadline or something because the channel is not the right channel, that you communicated with the person, or that the person is updating you, or however that may play out. And so a project management tool, depending on what your work is like, is another good investment or another great thing to consider. And I think Matt is going to speak more about that later on, but I just thought I'd make a little connection with it for the technological part of the discussion. In our work, I saw in the chat someone mentioning about connectivity in some of our communities, and that is one of the challenges for us as well. Just making sure that people can remain connected. And so far, it hasn't been like a huge roadblock, I find. We're usually very understanding that if we're on a call and it drops, something's happening with the internet, the person will come back. There is no expectation that you have to have a perfectly working internet connection, but we do provide, when we're starting up, like we'll get from the employee what they have access to and what they don't have access to. And in some cases, we've even considered buying and sending team members those little internet, I can't remember the name for them now, but the internet attachments that you can use to get better access. So that's also an option if you're working with people in communities where internet is not readily available or it's not very reliable. That's something that you can get for team members. And if that's a cost that the team member, if that's a cost, we would usually bear that cost for the team member, along with providing like computer or a camera. We also help with setting up their office space. So people are given a certain amount that they can spend per month with discussion with their supervisor, and they are reimbursed for that amount. So if they need a mouse or a camera or proper chair to sit on, computers, screens for their computer, we also accommodate that as best as we can, in discussions with supervisors as well and the team member, to make sure that people are comfortable in the space that they have. And we don't expect everybody to renovate a whole space in their house for a full office. We're pretty comfortable, I find, like people just work where they are. So we know when a team member has put their Christmas tree up, for example, like Matt is a Christmas fan. So we can see his tree in the background, or some people may be at their kitchen table. Some people may be making coffee while we're having our meeting. So it's an environment where we allow for that kind of flexibility, because people are people. But then there are also expectations where, if it's like a client meeting or that kind of thing, you want to be attentive and focused. So you don't necessarily want to be making a soup or stew while you're on a client meeting. But when we're internal team meetings, that's where we're more relaxed and have those kinds of environments. But those are just some of the parameters that you set, but still allowing people to be comfortable in the environment that they have, to work in. The digital workplace, in how I support the company, I see it starting from recruitment. So from recruitment right through to the employee experience, and if or when the employee decides to take another turn in their career, that whole experience, because of how we work, has to feel engaging, and the employee, the new team member, must feel like they belong. So in many, probably we've had the experience, you apply for a job, you do the interview, and you get a call, yeah, you were successful, and then 2 weeks pass and you don't hear a thing from the company. Okay, I got the job, what's next? Like, when am I going to hear about my start date? When am I going to hear about training? Or you don't hear from the company. Because of a digital workplace, we can't afford for that to happen, because we want the people to feel connected from the moment we offer them the job and they accept it. We want to know that we're thinking about them, we're planning for them to be with us, and let them feel that they made the right decision to join your organization or organization. So one of the things that I try to do is, after that offer letter, try just to follow up and say, hey, this is how we're planning for you. These are some of the things that we are putting in place. Is there anything else that you may need? And once we have that, we get the ball rolling and just checking in, don't let 2 weeks pass without the new employee hearing from you. And so now they understand, they're getting an understanding of your culture and how you work, but they're also getting an understanding of your values. Like, you value people, you value connection, you value information sharing, and those kinds of things. For us, we are a 4-day work week. So we work Monday to Thursday, yes. And Fridays we're off from work. But with the work, you have the option, like for me and for Matt, I'm sure, like sometimes if you're on a project and you really feel like you want to put some hours in on a Friday, go for it. It's totally up to you. But Fridays are off for all team members. And that's written in our contracts. So I guess we're taking the digital workplace a notch higher, where and this has been going on for over a year. We've spoken to team members and they've had favorable response to this. Like, people feel that flexibility is great, their mental well-being, the ability to connect with community and to volunteer in their community, even the ability to just, know that they have a day of the week where they can attend to appointments and they can do, anything else that they would love to do. And that is encouraging because it gives a sense of freedom and a sense of flexibility and control. And with the 4-day work week, it's not that we're bumping the hours for the other days to being 10 hours or 12 hours. It's an 8 hours, 4-day work week. And because of how we work, there's much flexibility as well in terms of, you may need to take the morning off because you have an appointment, but you can make up for that in the evening if you choose to work a few hours extra. So we have that flexibility, and that for us is a part of, decolonizing how we work and not being too rigid and hard and fast in the hours people work, sitting in your chair from X time to X time, no consideration for life outside of doing the boss's work, that kind of thing. We want to make sure that people are also able to cater for their lives and what they have to do. So that doing that, because we do that, we have to ensure that we have a workplace, a digital workplace that can allow people to catch up at any time. So if I jump off at 2 p.m., but I come back on at 7 on a project or a task, I'm able to see an update from somebody else who may have been working on that task because we have a project management software. So it's considering how do you work and what tools that you need to make sure that you are maintaining your processes, maintaining your productivity, and taking care of people, which is very important for us. So I talk about providing supplies for staff, making sure the onboarding process is smooth and people have an idea of your values and those things as you are onboarding them and as you're experiencing the organization culture. Now, for communication and collaboration, these are essential for any digital workplace to be, I would say, effective and to work well, because it can be frustrating. And Matt hinted at some of the things that can cause frustration. If you have too many emails or too many chats or just things coming at you from different angles and you're not sure how to compartmentalize the information that's coming in, that can be a challenge for employees. And so we have to decide how we're communicating, when we're communicating, what we're communicating. So we've set up different chats, for example, for new business versus chats to talk about our project management software versus chats to talk about any random thing that you see on the internet, any funny meme that you see, any crazy thought that just crossed your mind. You can have that conversation in a random chat. And then there's a general staff chat where anything staff related, important announcements, that's where it's gonna go. We do weekly emails from the founder, from Shani, just updating people on what's coming up for the week. So people are in the know. they're by themselves at home, but they feel connected because they're in the know. So giving those weekly updates and doing information sessions where necessary. I think a big part of this as well is how we are catering for the whole being and the whole person. So in communicating with people and in our collaboration, we're making sure that we know how we work with each other. So what's Shawna-Kay's style versus what's Matt's style? How does Shawna-Kay work differently from Matt or from Elizabeth or anybody else on our team, so that we know where our talents and our strengths are. And one of our values is that we build on each other's strengths. That's what our focus is. So, you know, we know there are some areas where people are like 100%, that's their area. That's what we want to work with. And the areas where you're probably 50 or 60, we help to build that, but we're not focused on just, you know, kind of focusing on, oh, you're not good at that, you're not good at that. We build on the strengths that people have. So we communicate in a timely manner. I mentioned some of the ways and tools that we use to communicate. And we ensure that people are aware of these tools, but we also allow that two-way communication. And for digital workplace, I find this to be super important. People don't want to be told all the time, do this, do that, do this, do that. They want to be a part of the conversation. And Matt mentioned about generation. What are we now? Z, Y, X? This generation wanting more of that conversation and being a part of decision. And again, that's another decolonial way of the workplace, because typically in many places, spaces that are not like where we work, it's more telling what to do and telling how to do and telling what's good for you and telling, you know, how it should go. But in our space, we try to have those conversations where people are able to say, well, you know what, I've been using that chat and it's not working for me. Can we explore something else? Or here's something I found on the internet. What do you think about us trying this? In a respectful way, of course. And they're able to say that, and that is taken on by leadership or their supervisor for discussion. And not all the time would be able to say, accommodate whatever is brought to the fore, but there's a listening ear to what people have to say. And when we can accommodate, we do accommodate. But when we can't, we go back to people and say, well, this is a good suggestion, but here's why it may not work for us. So having that communication and collaboration is very important. And although we're fully remote, we also have a space in Edmonton and Calgary where people can meet up. So some people we're good being remote, but sometimes we want to see people. We want to have lunch together, or we want to work together for a couple hours with someone sitting next to us or across from us. And so we have some co-working spaces that we use in Edmonton and Calgary. And it's not an obligation for people to go to these spaces, but it just creates another opportunity for people who may get tired of being alone by themselves all day, every day, and just want to go out and to meet co-workers. We provide that as well. So include people in your decision making and include people in your communication decisions and in the tools and platforms and experiences that work and don't work as they're doing their jobs. And I find that people are more likely to buy into changes, and they're more likely to work with procedures and processes if they're involved in creating those and developing those procedures and policies. Culture and engagement, I'll ask Matt to talk a little about how we work in that area.
Sure, yeah, and I'll try to fly through the next few items really quickly in case there's any questions at the end. So yeah, culture and engagement, just again, reiterating how important it is that whatever that digital workplace looks like for you, that you are finding ways through practice to incorporate your values. And that's how you're going to maintain or sustain your existing workplace culture, especially if you're an already established organization, potentially going through a transition. I think for me, that's what's really been important is, you know, the chat has talked about this, like what do like weekly meetings or monthly meetings look like as a team? For our organization, we meet every morning at 9 in the morning for half an hour. And we have a different person host each morning to talk about either what's going on for the week or to do a team building activity. And for us, it's a great way to just check in, make sure, like to be able to see like who's showing up and like who's doing work, but also like who is requiring support this week, or what are the big milestones as an organization that we need to really help push through this week. For me, those daily check-ins have been really integral to maintaining and sustaining our workplace culture. Making sure that you're thinking about innovative ways to celebrate your organization's wins, share when you have learned a really important lesson. Something I really value too, our founder has open office hours. So twice a week, she has a drop-in meeting that everyone has in their calendar, and anybody can go in that meeting in that 1 hour window and go meet with the founder to talk about anything, projects, about how things are going at work, just to visit and hang out. And those types of things are, you may have had in a traditional office by going and knocking on your CEO's door and saying hi. Just trying to find ways to support those types of moments again in a digital workspace. Next slide. And when it comes to management productivity, again, we come to this work with a really unique lens, I think, really trying to decolonize practices, traditional management practices or Western management practices. I find that our management team, we really try to treat our leadership team as supports. And so how are we best positioned to lean in and elevate the people who are really engaged in our projects? And so for us, that means not micromanaging, but really trying to support the conversation and those staff through those problems that they're trying to work through, whether that's with clients or with each other. For us, it's really we work as a peer and we work sort of in circle as equals. So it's not about leveraging intimidation or your power or experience to drive results. It's about really collaborating, working together, and elevating each other. I think that this type of environment is also a really great equalizer in a digital workspace when it comes to having the same tools. Showing up in a digital workspace, there aren't the same pressures necessarily as like maybe public speaking or meeting rooms. I think there's lots of unique opportunities for personalities who maybe feel challenged or threatened in traditional Western and office environments to feel more flexibility or freedom to explore or try new things in a digital workplace. I think that's really exciting too. We talked a lot about project management tools and those tools for collaboration, so I won't elaborate more on that. I think the one space that I would want to touch on briefly then is just the security and storage. Again, Shawna-Kay and I think would be the first to admit that we aren't cybersecurity experts, but we do understand how important it is that our client files, our staff files are secure and safe, and that there's process around who has access to them, how they're shared or not, and why. And that it's really important if you're exploring a digital workplace to do that work on the front end of understanding what accountabilities you have as an organization to your staff, to your clients in that work. Working previously in housing and homelessness, there's government legislation that's really, really clear about what you can and cannot include, how you can or cannot store items. And you don't want to put your organization at risk by making assumptions about what you can or cannot use. And so there's really awesome consultants or other organizations who can help you navigate those conversations if you don't have somebody in-house. I really encourage you to try to find somebody in-house who can help you with that. But yeah, those would be the two big considerations when it comes to digital workplace from my perspective too. And I know we're right at 4 o'clock, so I'll end it there in case there's any questions, comments.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Shawna-Kay and Matt. Like the chat box was blowing up. So there was a lot of good questions that were happening. It is right on the hour. One question. If anybody out there wants to bring in one question, come on in. I do recommend checking out their websites. And I'm sure there's a opportunity for you to leave a question. Connect with one of the staff there. So Question, anyone? There we go. There's the website link. Okay, Patricia?
No, I was very active in the chat.
You were.
I just had one question. It's not even really related to the digital space, so I apologize. But I did check out your website. I saw your team. I see that you've got graphic designers. And so with your reports, with some of your PR stuff, do you guys do all in-house design, or do you actually sometimes look outside at other images? Because I know that where I work, when we're doing reports, and we're really finding that we need more Indigenous perspectives. We talked about culture. We talked about, you know, understanding the differences between Dene and Lakota, Nakota, Dakota when it comes to languages and images. Do you guys do any images online? And if so, what sites do you use to access Indigenous specific content?
Yeah, great question. I would say a majority of our work is produced in-house, but Shawna-Kay, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. I know we've collaborated with other teams or other designers as well in production of some items. I don't know if I have the exact resources, but.
Yeah, most of our design is in-house, and we work closely with the communities when we're doing those designs. So it's conversations that kind of give the designers the inspiration for what a design could look like. We do find that there's a gap in like stock image, for example, if we want to use stock. And so for a few of our projects, we've contracted Indigenous photographers to do a couple images for us, like to do a couple photographs or whatever. But we're also in the process of thinking through a stock for Indigenous talent. So hopefully, you know, that's something that we can bring through to the end, because we've also heard from some of our clients, how do we find photos that are not just, you know, a cultural way or something, but just people, Indigenous people in everyday life, enjoying a movie, enjoying a hockey game, and not the typical ones that you would see all the time. So we are in the process of trying to get funding for something like that. But so far we've tried to use photographers to capture images, and some of our clients have also done that. And where we can't, it's talking with communities and trying to come up with unique images based on those conversations with communities, pulling from their culture and different elements in their culture that they want to include in those designs. But yeah, it's a challenge all around, and hopefully we can fill that gap soon.
Good, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That is the hour, everyone. What a great presentation. You know, what I heard today was flexibility, creativity, capacity building, collaboration, good communication. So good, so rich today. I know, I feel like we could have kept talking and had more questions and conversation, but I really appreciate Patricia and Ken and Ryan and Amber for, you know, bring in some of your thoughts into that chat box and today's discussion. So thank you so much for joining. We hope to see you again. Be well, walk in a good way. You know, even though it's cold out there, I still recommend, you know, go find that connection with Mother Earth, with the lands, you know, always honor, you know, the creator's world, and that we get to be a part of it. So have a good day, and we will see you again soon. Peace, everyone.
Yay, thank you.